Do you even lift? 4 words no lifter wants to hear if they do in fact lift, and if you yourself have been lifting consistently but you don't really look like you lift, here's 7 reasons why that might be the case and how to fix them. So the first reason why you don't look like you lift is that you're trying to maintain too low of a body fat percentage. One of the best ways to spin your wheels in the gym and make little to no size and strength progress is to heavily prioritize leanness over mass. Don't be one of these guys out here thinking that they're going to maintain 10% body fat all year and just magically synthesize a significant amount of new muscle out of thin air. Gaining muscle requires energy, and if it isn't coming from your food intake, then it has to come from your fat stores, and your body can't just endlessly swap out fat calories for muscle growth. It's ultimately a survival machine, and at some point it has to make a trade-off between adding more muscle versus getting leaner, and at that point you'll just hit a standstill and you're going to need to eat some food to get bigger. Keep in mind that most people you see with impressive physiques who carry a significant amount of muscle, they didn't get there through permanent recomping or by very slowly chipping away with a 25 calorie surplus over the course of 10 years, even if that's what they promote now. In most cases, they implemented some kind of focused gaining approach for a set period of time and poured their effort into that specific goal to maximize their progress at the expense of adding some extra body fat. And it's important to understand that there's a big difference between just adding some extra fat versus transforming yourself into a borderline morbidly obese blob of goo. The recommendation here isn't to dive headfirst into an aimless get huge or die trying dirty bulk, but instead to go with an intelligent lean bulking approach of roughly a couple hundred calories above maintenance give or take that might produce around 1 to 1.5 pounds of overall body weight gain per month and 2 pounds at the most. That's really all you need to optimize growth in most cases, almost certainly no more than 300 calories, and advanced lifters can technically go even lower at around 100 calories or possibly even less, since their overall muscle building potential will be quite a bit lower at that point, though tracking an amount that small quickly becomes impractical, so this is really just a rough estimate. The amount of actual lean tissue your body can synthesize on a daily basis is no more than a few grams, and so you definitely don't need a huge surplus, but if you're already relatively lean, then you do need a surplus of some kind if you want to make real gains. Believe it or not, this isn't a matter of either force-feeding yourself with olive oil-infused weight gainer shakes or eating precisely at maintenance. There is a healthy middle ground between those two. And on the same point, not only will staying too lean make it very hard, if not impossible, for you to put on significant muscle, but you also won't look like you lift in the sense that you might look great shirtless or in a tank top, but in regular clothes you'll probably just look very average, if not downright small, depending on how lean you are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing depending on what type of physique you're going for, but it's just something to keep in mind. Alright, the second reason why you don't look like you lift is that you're not bulking for long enough. So maybe you do finally make the decision to implement a definite calorie surplus, but then as soon as you notice your abs faintly blurring by the slightest amount and that Instagram-induced leanness anxiety kicks in, you immediately panic thinking you need to go back and cut again, and this ultimately leads to a constant yo-yo process where you endlessly cycle back and forth between bulking for very brief periods but not long enough to really make significant changes, dropping back into a deficit, and then after a year you basically look the same. The truth is that spending all this time consuming online fitness content and scrolling through shredded physique after shredded physique, that's almost certainly warped your perception of what it actually means to be lean in the first place, to where what you think of as fat is probably still top 1 to 2% leanness within the general population. Keep in mind that even at 15% body fat as a male, you'll still be in the top couple percentile, and even up to around 18 to 20%, you'll still be within an acceptable healthy range. Now, I'm not saying you need to bulk into the high teens, and if you just want to be leaner in general and have that more defined aesthetic look, that's totally fine. I've personally rocked the bear mode look in the past, and I can definitely say that's not my preferred physique type anymore, and I do enjoy being on the leaner side as well. But if you're still in the earlier stages of building up your overall size and strength base, you have to get comfortable with spending at least some time out of the year in a slightly softer state for the sake of maximizing your overall long-term progress. The guys you see who actually stay very lean year-round are by far the exception and not the rule, and if they are carrying decent muscle mass, then they probably bulked in the past at some point, not to mention that how they look online with everything optimized in terms of lighting and angles and pumps, that's usually not how they look in person anyway, and if you really knew how a lot of these guys feel behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis in terms of increased hunger, lower energy, decreased strength, both muscular and erectile, you probably wouldn't even think it was worth it in the first place. And also remember that even if you do look a bit softer once you shift into a calorie surplus, it's not as if it's all body fat either. You'll be retaining more water, you'll have more food volume in your stomach, and that'll probably give the impression that you've gained more fat than you actually have, but those things will reverse pretty quickly once your calories come back down. The third reason why you don't look like you lift is because you don't actually lift. I mean, you lift weights up and down in the gym, but you don't truly lift. You're not genuinely pushing yourself with the intensity that's required to make real significant gains. Instead, you might be falling into the very common trap nowadays of sitting around trying to optimize every little aspect of your training approach, putting in all this research looking for the perfect science-based muscle building exercises and training split and periodization scheme, and debating in comment sections about what degree of shoulder extension and external rotation is best for hitting the lower fibers of the biceps long head, engaging in all this mental masturbation, but while skipping out on the one thing that's most important for stimulating growth, which is getting under the bar and training hard. When you strip everything down, the underlying stimulus for hypertrophy beyond anything else that you do is placing the muscle under sufficient mechanical tension. And the way you do that, as I've repeated probably 1,000,001 times over the years, is by training in close proximity to muscular failure. Meaning there's a gradual, involuntary loss of rep speed or range of motion despite the fact that you're exerting with 100% effort, and you're continuing the set to around that 0 to 2 RIR zone, though I think for the very best gains, more like 1 RIR should be the general baseline, and pushing some sets all the way to failure here and there as well. It's not about how much of a pump you get or feeling the burn.
Oh, it's a deep burn. Oh, it's so deep.
How fatigued you feel on a total body scale, or how sore you are afterwards. All of those things are natural byproducts that will happen to some degree anytime you train hard, but they're not directly causative for growth, and they can also be present even when you aren't training anywhere near failure, because any type of high volume repetitive movement can cause those things. The most pump, burn, and soreness that I experience isn't when I'm actually training, it's when I'm recording lightweight exercise tutorials with 10 reps in reserve, but just doing it over and over again for hours on end. A properly structured program is obviously crucial. Good exercise selection and technique is also key to ensure that the tension is being directed toward the muscle you're actually trying to target. But if you're not consistently training right up close to that failure point, then nothing else you do in the gym will matter, because it means your body is already equipped to deal with the stressors you're throwing at it, and so there's no real incentive to make any changes and grow further. And I know this all sounds so basic, but that's literally all it takes to make the difference between minimal versus significant muscle building results. That brief window toward the end of the set where you either keep pushing through the discomfort or you put the weight down. If you're never making faces like this on at least some of your sets, if you're not letting out involuntary primal sounds here and there as you grind through those last couple very difficult reps, if you never feel a bit nervous before performing some of the more challenging lifts, if you've never found yourself covered in blood and vomit as you desperately crawl across the floor after an all-out leg day, okay, maybe that's a bit extreme, but if those first three don't apply to you at all, I can pretty much guarantee you're not training with sufficient effort to get the very best results. The fourth reason why you don't look like you lift is that your testosterone dosage is simply too low. If you're only consuming 300 milligrams per day as opposed to the optimal 1000 milligram dose, you're going to be missing out on all the amazing muscle building benefits that Turk supplements have to offer, and you won't be able to, okay, obviously I'm kidding, though it is pretty insane to think there are actually people out there spending $150 a month on this stuff and thinking it's going to help them build muscle. But the actual fourth reason why you don't look like you lift, or in this case, why you only sort of look like you lift, is that you're doing what a high percentage of lifters do, particularly beginners, which is overemphasizing what are typically considered the showy muscles, usually chest and biceps, and then thinking that that's the key to an impressive physique. If you just run a quick search on YouTube or scroll through Instagram, it's pretty obvious that chest and biceps videos are the ones that tend to get the most attention, and if you glance around most standard gyms, chest presses, flies, and curls are going to be the most common exercises you'll see. In reality, your biceps are the smallest major muscle group on your entire body, and your chest doesn't carry nearly as much total mass as you might think either. Your triceps actually make up roughly 2/3 of your total upper arm mass, and your pecs are about equal in volume to your triceps, even though the triceps are considered to be a small muscle. And the chest is also about the same size as the lats and the same size as the traps as well. Obviously, building your chest and biceps is still important as part of the overall picture, but there's no reason to prioritize those areas over others with a million different exercise variations and endless volumes. It's actually your shoulders that carry the most total mass of any individual upper body muscle group, and having a well-developed back will do a lot more in terms of giving you that strong and powerful look. Focusing mainly on the showy muscles will have you looking impressive from the front until you start rotating and everyone can see that you're basically built like this. So make sure to train everything with equal focus, and then if you really need to, you can prioritize later on if you have certain weak points. If you're finding these tips helpful so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay in the loop on future videos. And the fifth reason why you don't look like you lift is because of shiny object syndrome. In other words, you're getting overloaded with all these different training styles and exercise variations you find online and not sticking to any one plan over a consistent period. Just aimlessly bouncing around thinking the next program or the next special exercise or lifting technique is going to be the key to to unlocking the gains you're after. In reality, this is one of the most counterproductive things you can do, because when you're constantly switching up your training variables as far as weekly split, exercises, exercise order, volume, rep ranges, technique, you won't be able to track progressive overload properly because you have nothing objective to measure each workout against, and progressive overload is ultimately what your entire training program should be centered around, meaning you're training hard and close to failure like we already mentioned, and making steady incremental improvements in your training performance, mainly in the form of additional weight and reps. Muscle confusion is a myth. Your muscles don't have a mind of their own where they just magically stop responding if you perform the same movement or use the same form or the same rep range. All they experience is the amount of tension they're placed under, and if that tension is sufficient, it will trigger a growth response. Not only does keeping your training variables constant maximize your gains by allowing you to properly track your progress, but performing the same exercises repeatedly over a set period also allows you to refine your lifting technique so that you can get the very most out of those movements, whereas if you're performing a ton of different variations and changing things up every week, you won't be able to truly dial in and master the form. So get a concrete plan in place with the same training split from week to week, the same exercises in the same order, and focus on progressing with that plan for a consistent cycle of training. And remember that as long as you're making continued progress on paper, there's no explicit need to change anything. The fact that your lifts are going up consistently means that what you're doing is working. The sixth reason why you don't look like you lift is that you think the best way to look like you lift is to copy the routines of the people who look most like they lift. In other words, the guys you see online with the most muscular and shredded physiques, and then assuming that if you just follow the workout routines and exercise variations they show, that you're going to get a similar result. Now, this is counterintuitive for a lot of people because it's only normal to think that the more jacked someone is, the more accurate the information they put out must be, but that's very often not the case, and for a variety of reasons. First, you have to consider genetics, and remember that the people who are in the upper percentile genetics-wise can very often achieve outstanding results even if they're using a training approach that would be far less than ideal for the average person. And if someone does have a physique that's elite enough to stand out from the crowd and get to the top of the Instagram or TikTok Explore feed, then chances are that they probably do have above average genetics. You also have to consider PED use, which allows people to achieve far better results even on a highly suboptimal approach. No, steroids are not just the icing on the cake, they're literally like 50% of the cake. You're not missing the secret exercise being shown, you're missing the 600 milligrams of testosterone. And in many cases, you're dealing with top genetics combined with PED use, in which case the disconnect between physique and knowledge can be worlds apart.
What percent body fat?
I was 0.33.
And if someone is just posting advice based on what worked for them, it might be totally inapplicable to you as a natural lifter who isn't genetically blessed in that same way. And then on top of this, you also have to consider that, believe it or not, information that gets posted online is not always done with the intention of genuinely helping, and very often it's just done for engagement, to sell products, and to get more clout in general. So just because you see a certain exercise variation or training strategy doesn't mean that the person who posted it actually used that to build their physique, or that they even necessarily use it now.
It is the fly curl press. Curl, and then a press, and then a fly, and then a curl, and then a press. Just like that.
The same goes for nutrition advice, supplements. A lot of people just post things purely to seem unique or to have something novel to offer, since fitness is such a hyper-competitive platform, and promoting the basics is typically much less effective if you want to garner attention. Now, don't get me wrong, I like to see people lead by example too, and I think if you are giving muscle building advice, then you should have some decent results to show for it. I wouldn't take financial advice from a broke guy or dating advice from some random neckbeard on Reddit, but just don't make the mistake of thinking that more muscle automatically equals more knowledge, or that the most jacked people are the ones giving out the most helpful advice. If that was the case, then you should just unsubscribe from every fitness channel you currently follow, go back to 2002 and copy everything Ronnie Coleman did. And then lastly, the seventh reason why you don't look like you lift is that you're just expecting too much too soon. You simply haven't been lifting for long enough on a properly structured plan to see a significant physique transformation. When you look at it in terms of your entire life as a whole, building muscle doesn't actually take that long, relatively speaking, but it sure as hell doesn't happen overnight. And if you're out there checking the mirror every week expecting to see huge visual changes, constantly measuring your arms, comparing your progress photos obsessively, it's only going to leave you frustrated and disappointed. Fat loss can happen relatively quickly if everything is dialed in, but muscle growth is a different ballgame and definitely takes more time. Depending on how well structured your program is, as well as your genetics, keep in mind that everyone builds muscle at different rates, but to see serious changes, it's probably going to take several months of consistent work, and to really improve your physique to a standout level, unless you're on the genetically blessed side or the secret sauce or both, then that's likely going to be measured in terms of years. People often message me asking for advice, saying they're working hard but they're not seeing the results they're after, and while there are a lot of common training and nutrition mistakes people make that need correcting, a lot of the time the best answer is just keep going, this shit takes time. And if you are willing to put in the time and want a complete system that'll help you avoid all the pitfalls we outlined in this video and put you on the most efficient path toward your goal physique, make sure to check out my TrainWise app. It condenses my 20+ years of coaching and training experience into one place and gives you fully structured training plans, daily nutrition targets, exercise tutorials, exclusive educational content, community support, and more, so that you can just show up, put in the work, and get the results you're after. You can sign up free for 7 days over at trainwiseapp.com, and then make sure to give this video a watch next, where I go over 10 things to avoid before your workout to make sure you're getting in the highest quality sessions possible. Hope you guys found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.